I want a hall pass for my birthday. Those 6 words came out of Simone's mouth while I held a velvet box with the diamond earrings I'd saved 3 months to buy. The restaurant was dim, candles flickering between us, and the piano player was working through some Coltrane. I'd requested our table 2 weeks ago, the one by the window overlooking the harbor, where we'd had our first date 4 years back. The box was still warm in my palm, and I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, but her words hit me like cold water, like someone had opened a window in January and let winter walk right in. She wasn't joking. I could see it in her eyes, the way she held her wine glass, confident, almost excited, like she'd been rehearsing this moment. Her dress was red, the one I loved, the one she knew made her look incredible. She'd done her makeup differently tonight, smoky eyes, darker lips, and I'd thought it was for me, thought she was trying to make the evening special. But now I understood. She'd dressed up for the idea of someone else, for the permission she was about to take, whether I gave it or not. The earrings in my hand suddenly felt like evidence of my own stupidity. 3 months of overtime shifts and skipped lunches, all for a woman who was already halfway out the door. My name is Lewis, and this is my revenge story. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with the city you're watching from. It really helps me bring you more stories. I didn't speak, couldn't. My throat had closed up, and my mind was running through every moment of the past few months, looking for the signs I'd missed. Had she been distant? Had she stopped saying, "I love you," first? Had there been late nights, new passwords, different perfume? I couldn't remember, couldn't focus, because all I could see was her face across from me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to either fight or fold. The piano kept playing, and somewhere behind us a couple laughed, and the waiter walked past with a tray of desserts, and the whole world just kept moving like mine hadn't just stopped completely. I smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It wasn't anything close to joy or understanding or acceptance. It was the smile you give when your body doesn't know what else to do, when your brain has stopped sending clear signals and your face just defaults to something neutral, something that won't cause a scene. She took it as agreement. I could see that immediately. Her shoulders relaxed, and she reached across the table to touch my hand, like we'd just decided on a vacation spot or what color to paint the living room. She started talking about boundaries and honesty and how this would make us stronger, how she'd read articles about couples who did this and came back more connected, more alive. The velvet box was still in my other hand, hidden below the table. I should have put it in my pocket, should have done something with it, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, nodding occasionally, watching her mouth move, watching her justify what she was about to do. She mentioned a coworker's name, Jason, casual, like it was nothing, like she hadn't just confirmed that she'd already picked him out, already had someone waiting. She said it would just be one night, just her birthday weekend, just something to get out of her system before we took the next step in our relationship. The next step. Like there was somewhere to go after this, like we could build anything on ground this broken. I signed the check when it came. My hand was steady, which surprised me, and I left a 20% tip because that's what I always did, because some part of me was still running on autopilot, still trying to be the good guy, the reliable one. Simone kept talking in the car, planning, explaining, reassuring, and I drove us home in silence, taking the turns I'd taken 1,000 times, parking in the spot I always parked in. She kissed my cheek when we got inside, told me she loved me, told me this was going to be good for us. Then she went to the bathroom, and I heard the shower start, and I stood in our bedroom holding those earrings, staring at the bed we'd shared for 3 years. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there next to her, listening to her breathe, watching the ceiling fan spin shadows across the walls. She'd curled up against me like always, her hand on my chest, her hair smelling like vanilla shampoo, and everything looked normal, looked like any other night. But it wasn't. Nothing was. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face across that table, saw the way she'd smiled when she thought I'd agreed, saw the confidence in her expression, like she'd known I wouldn't fight back, known I'd just accept whatever she wanted. By morning, I'd made my decision. Not the one she thought I'd made, not the one she'd assumed when I smiled and nodded. I was going to find out who my wife really was, what she'd really been doing, and then I was going to show her what it cost to mistake kindness for weakness. The sun came through our bedroom window, and Simone stretched beside me, kissed my shoulder, got up to start her day like it was any other Saturday. She had no idea. Neither did I, really, not yet, but I was about to learn. Simone left for brunch with her sister around 10. I heard her in the bedroom, humming while she got dressed, the same tune she always hummed when she was happy, when things were going her way. She called out goodbye, blew me a kiss from the doorway, and told me she'd be back around 3. The door closed, her car started, and then the house was quiet, just me and the sound of the refrigerator humming and the neighbor's dog barking 2 yards over. I sat on the couch for 5 minutes, maybe 10, just breathing, just thinking, before I stood up and walked into our bedroom. Her phone was the problem, I knew that immediately. She never left it behind, always had it in her hand or her purse or her back pocket, always face down on tables, always angled away when she typed. I'd noticed it months ago but told myself I was being paranoid, told myself that everyone was protective of their phones now, that privacy was normal in a relationship. But now I knew better. Now I understood that privacy and secrets weren't the same thing, that one was healthy and the other was poison. Her laptop was on the dresser, closed but not locked away, and I opened it expecting a password screen that would shut me out completely. It opened straight to her desktop. She'd been logged in, probably fell asleep working on something the night before, and there it was, everything, just waiting. Her email was open in one tab, Facebook in another, and when I clicked through to her messages, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Conversations with men I didn't know, dozens of them, going back months, some going back over a year. Nothing physical, she'd been telling the truth about that part, but the emotional betrayal was worse somehow, more deliberate. These weren't accidents or drunken mistakes. These were choices, daily choices, to connect with other men, to flirt, to build something secret and separate from our life together. The messages followed a pattern. She'd match with someone on a dating app, start talking, let things get flirtatious but never quite cross into explicit territory. She'd complain about me subtly, nothing direct, just hints that she was unhappy, that she felt trapped, that she wondered what else was out there. The men would respond exactly how she wanted, telling her she deserved better, that she was too beautiful to be unappreciated, that her boyfriend clearly didn't understand what he had. She'd never met any of them in person, I could see that from the conversations, but she'd kept them all on a string, kept them as options, as ego boosts, as evidence that she could leave whenever she wanted. Jason was different. His messages were recent, just the past 2 months, and they were more aggressive, more certain. He worked in her office, I knew that from the things she'd mentioned before, and he'd been pushing for them to meet outside work, to grab drinks, to see where things went. She'd resisted at first, kept it professional, but then something shifted. 3 weeks ago, she'd sent him a message after midnight, after we'd had an argument about money, about me picking up extra shifts instead of spending more time with her. She told Jason she was tired of being with someone who didn't prioritize her, someone who thought love was just about paying bills and showing up. She told him she needed to feel wanted, needed to feel alive. I took screenshots of everything. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I needed evidence, needed proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting. My hands were shaking by the time I finished, and I had to close the laptop and walk away, had to go outside and breathe real air, had to remember that this was real. This was happening. This was my life now. The neighborhood was quiet, just some kids playing basketball down the street and Mrs. Patterson watering her roses next door. Everything looked normal, looked like a regular Saturday in a regular city, like the world hadn't just confirmed that the woman I loved had been auditioning my replacement for over a year. I thought about confronting her when she got home, thought about laying out the screenshots and demanding answers, demanding apologies, demanding something that would make this hurt less. But I didn't. Some instinct told me to wait, to watch, to let her think everything was fine while I figured out my next move. She'd asked for a hall pass, and I'd smiled and nodded, and she thought that meant I was weak, thought that meant she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. She was wrong. She'd just given me permission to stop pretending, stop performing, stop being the understanding husband who absorbed every disappointment and kept loving her anyway. When Simone came home that afternoon, I was on the couch watching a game, beer in my hand, looking relaxed. She kissed the top of my head, asked if I wanted to order Thai food for dinner, told me about her sister's new apartment downtown. I said yes to the food, listened to her stories, laughed at the right moments, and the whole time I was thinking about those messages, about Jason, about the way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, we ate pad thai on the couch and watched a movie, and she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I stared at the screen, not seeing anything, planning everything. Monday morning, I called a divorce attorney. Not to file immediately, not to rush into anything, but to understand my options, to know what I was working with. Her name was Patricia Rowe. Came recommended by a guy at work who'd gone through a separation last year, and she had an office downtown in one of those old buildings with marble floors and wood-paneled walls. I took a late lunch, told my supervisor I had a dentist appointment, and sat in her waiting room feeling like I was betraying something, even though I knew Simone had betrayed me first, had been betraying me for months in small ways that added up to something irreversible. Patricia was direct, no sympathy but no judgment either, just facts and numbers and timelines. We'd been together 4 years, but only married for 18 months, which meant the divorce would be simpler than I'd feared. We didn't have kids, didn't own property together, didn't have joint accounts beyond one shared credit card we'd opened for emergencies. My name was on the lease for our apartment, hers was on the car payment for the sedan she drove. She made more money than me, worked as a project manager for a tech company while I was still grinding through night classes for my business degree, still working construction during the day to pay tuition. Patricia said that meant I wouldn't owe alimony, might even have a case for her to cover the filing fees. The conversation was clinical, almost cold, and I appreciated that. I didn't want comfort or reassurance or someone telling me it would get better. I wanted information. Wanted to know exactly how to dismantle a marriage as efficiently as she'd dismantled my trust. Patricia asked if there was infidelity, and I told her about the messages, about Jason, about the hall pass request. She didn't seem surprised, said she'd seen versions of this story 100 times. Always the same arc, same justifications, same shock when consequences finally arrived. She asked if I wanted to wait, maybe try counseling, maybe see if Simone would change her mind. I told her no. I told her to draw up the papers. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a court date 6 weeks out. It felt surreal, walking back to my truck with the physical evidence of my marriage ending tucked under my arm, like I'd just purchased something ordinary, something that wouldn't change everything. The sun was bright, traffic was heavy, and I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could drive, just breathing, just processing. Part of me wanted to go home and throw the papers at Simone, wanted to see her face when she realized I wasn't as passive as she thought, wasn't going to just smile and let her destroy what we'd built. But I didn't. I went back to work, finished my shift, came home like normal. Simone was in a good mood that week. She'd been texting constantly, always tilting her phone away, always smiling at the screen, and I knew she was talking to Jason, knew she was planning her birthday weekend, probably already had a hotel picked out, already had the whole thing choreographed in her mind. She'd bring it up casually, ask if I was still okay with their arrangement, give me one more chance to object. And when I didn't, when I smiled and nodded again, she'd take it as final permission, final proof that I didn't care enough to fight for her. She'd go through with it, come back home Sunday night feeling justified, feeling liberated, feeling like she'd won something. Wednesday evening, she made my favorite dinner, jerk chicken with rice and beans, cornbread from scratch. She lit candles, put on music, wore one of my old college shirts and nothing else, trying to be sweet, trying to remind me what I'd be missing if I made a fuss about her birthday plans. We ate together, talked about our days, and she mentioned Jason again. Casual, testing my reaction. She said he was taking her to that new restaurant on the waterfront, the expensive one that just opened last month, the one I couldn't afford. She said it like she was doing me a favor by being honest, like transparency made betrayal acceptable. I told her it sounded nice. I asked what she was going to wear, if she needed me to pick up her dry cleaning before Friday. She looked relieved, grateful even, and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. She told me I was different from other men, more secure, more evolved, that this was why she loved me, why she knew we were going to last. The words should have hurt, should have made me angry, but they just confirmed what I already knew. She didn't love me. She loved that I didn't challenge her, didn't demand respect, didn't expect her to honor the vows she'd made. She loved that I was convenient, safe, easy to control. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers spread out in front of me. I'd already signed my portions, already filled in the dates and details, already made my decision. All that was left was delivery, timing, the moment when I'd hand her the envelope and watch her world crack open. Patricia said I could serve her any time after filing with the court, that I didn't need to wait for a specific trigger or event. But I wanted to. I wanted her to have her hall pass weekend, wanted her to go through with it, wanted her to come home feeling victorious so the fall would be that much harder. Simone's birthday was Friday. She took the day off work, spent the morning at a salon getting her hair done, came home with her nails painted red and her skin glowing from whatever facial treatment she'd paid for. I was on the couch when she walked in, and she did a little spin, showing off, asking if I liked it. I told her she looked beautiful, which was true, and she kissed me, long and slow, like she was saying goodbye to one version of us and hello to whatever came next. She asked what I had planned for the evening, and I told her the truth, that I was going to grab drinks with some guys from work, shoot pool, stay out of her way. She seemed happy about that, relieved even, and I understood why. She didn't want me sitting at home alone, didn't want to feel guilty, didn't want the visual of me waiting for her while she was out with Jason. If I was busy, occupied, having my own fun, then she could tell herself this was mutual, that we were both getting something out of the arrangement. She kissed me again before she left to meet him, told me not to wait up, told me she'd see me tomorrow. I watched her drive away, watched her taillights disappear around the corner, and then I sat in the silence of our apartment feeling nothing and everything at the same time. I didn't go out. I'd lied about the drinks, about the guys from work, about having any plans at all. I stayed home, ate leftover chicken, watched a documentary about pyramids, and went to bed around 11. I didn't torture myself imagining what she was doing, didn't check her location on the phone tracking app we'd set up months ago for safety. I just existed, just moved through the hours, knowing that tomorrow everything would be different, that the countdown had started, that she'd used her hall pass and I'd use mine, the one I'd prepared, the one she didn't see coming. Saturday morning, she came home around 9. I heard her key in the lock, heard her trying to be quiet, probably expecting me to be asleep or angry or something that would let her control the narrative. But I was in the kitchen making coffee, already dressed, looking normal. She stopped in the doorway, and I could see her adjusting, trying to read my face, trying to figure out what I was thinking. I asked if she wanted breakfast, if she'd had fun, if Jason was nice. She nodded, said yes to all of it, sat down at the table like we were about to have a normal Saturday morning conversation. I poured her coffee, added cream the way she liked it, and slid the mug across to her. Then I pulled the envelope from the counter, the one I'd prepared 3 days ago, and placed it next to her cup. She looked at it, looked at me, and I saw confusion first, then concern, then something close to fear. She asked what it was, and I told her to open it. Told her it was my birthday gift to her, something I thought she deserved. Her hands were shaking when she pulled out the papers, and I watched her face change as she read, watched understanding hit her in waves. The first page was the petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name, my name, the date we'd married, the grounds for divorce listed as irreconcilable differences. She looked up at me, and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. No words, no sounds, just shock. I stayed calm, stayed still, let her process, let her understand that this was real, that I'd planned this, that her hall pass had cost her everything. She found her voice eventually, started asking questions, started saying she didn't understand, that we could work this out, that last night didn't mean anything, that she loved me. I let her talk, let her explain and justify and backtrack and promise. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd gotten confused, that the hall pass was just a stupid idea she'd read about online, that she hadn't actually done anything with Jason, that they'd just had dinner and talked. I didn't argue, didn't correct her, didn't tell her I didn't care what had or hadn't happened in that hotel room. The betrayal had occurred months ago, in those messages, in those dating apps, in the decision to treat our marriage like something disposable, something she could pause whenever she got bored. She started crying, real tears, and reached for my hand across the table. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold hers either, just let her grip my fingers while she begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance, to understand that she was sorry, that she'd do anything to fix this. I told her the papers were already filed, that the court date was set, that I'd pack my things and be out by the end of the week. Her tears turned to anger then, fast, like flipping a switch. She stood up, knocked her coffee over, and started yelling, asking how I could do this to her, how I could be so cold, how I could throw away 4 years over one night. The apartment felt smaller after that. Simone didn't leave, didn't give me space, just followed me from room to room demanding answers, demanding explanations, demanding something I couldn't give her. She wanted to know when I'd decided, how long I'd been planning, if there was someone else, if I'd been cheating too. The questions came fast, desperate, and I answered the ones that mattered, ignored the ones that didn't. I told her I'd decided the night she asked for the hall pass, that there was no one else, that I'd been faithful to a marriage she'd been dismantling for over a year. That stopped her just for a moment, and I saw recognition in her eyes, understanding that I knew, that I'd seen the messages. She asked how I'd found them, and I told her about the laptop, about the dating apps, about Jason and all the others before him. She tried to minimize it, said it was just talking, just harmless flirting, that she'd never actually met anyone. I asked if that was supposed to make it better, if emotional infidelity was somehow more acceptable than physical, if she thought I should be grateful she'd only fantasized about leaving instead of actually doing it. She didn't have an answer for that, just more tears, more apologies, more promises that meant nothing because trust, once broken that completely, doesn't heal with words. By Sunday, she'd moved through the stages, denial to anger to bargaining, and landed somewhere close to panic. She called her sister, her mother, her best friend from college, told them all I was divorcing her, made it sound like I'd blindsided her, like this had come from nowhere. I could hear her on the phone in the bedroom, voice high and frantic, painting herself as the victim, me as the villain. Her sister showed up Sunday afternoon, let herself in with the spare key Simone had given her, and tried to talk sense into me. She said marriage was work, that everyone made mistakes, that I was being stubborn and prideful, that real love meant forgiveness. I listened because she'd always been kind to me, had always treated me like family, and I didn't want to disrespect her. But when she finished, I asked if she'd be saying the same thing if it was her husband who'd spent a year on dating apps, her husband who'd asked permission to sleep with a coworker, her husband who'd made her feel like she wasn't enough. She went quiet, looked at Simone, then back at me, and I saw the moment she understood. She hugged her sister, told her she'd call later, and left without another word. Simone crumbled after that, sat on the floor in the hallway and sobbed, and I stepped over her to get to the bathroom, to shower, to wash off the residue of her breakdown. The next week was worse. I'd moved into the second bedroom, the one we'd been using for storage, and slept on an air mattress I'd bought from Target. Simone couldn't accept it, couldn't process that I was done, that her tears and promises weren't working. She'd wait outside the bathroom in the mornings, try to talk to me while I got ready for work, follow me to my truck and beg me to stay, to think about this, to remember what we'd had. I'd drive away with her standing in the parking lot, still in her pajamas, mascara running, looking broken. Part of me felt guilty, felt cruel, but a bigger part remembered that restaurant, that smile, that confidence when she'd asked for permission to betray me. She started showing up at my job site. First time was Tuesday. She brought lunch, said she'd made my favorite sandwich, wanted to talk during my break. My foreman saw her, made a comment about relationship trouble, and I had to explain that we were separating, that she was having a hard time with it. He nodded, said he'd been through 2 divorces himself, told me to handle my business but keep it away from the site. I told Simone she couldn't come back, that this was my workplace, that she was embarrassing both of us. She left crying, but Thursday she was back, parked across the street just watching, and I had to call her, had to tell her this was crossing a line. Friday, she tried a different approach. I came home to find the apartment cleaned, dinner cooking, candles lit, the whole romantic setup. She'd put on the dress from that night, the red one, and she'd done her makeup the same way, trying to recreate something, trying to remind me of who we'd been before everything broke. She asked me to sit, to eat with her, to just talk like adults. I sat because I was hungry and tired and didn't have the energy to fight. She served the food, poured wine, and started reminiscing, talking about our early days, our first apartment, the trip we took to Miami for her cousin's wedding. It was manipulation, obvious and desperate, but also sad, because I could tell she genuinely believed this would work, believed that nostalgia and physical proximity could override what she'd done. She reached for my hand during dessert, and I let her take it, let her feel like she was making progress, and then I told her I'd signed a lease for a studio apartment across town, that I was moving out Sunday, that the divorce was proceeding regardless of what she cooked or wore or promised. Her face went cold then, something shifting behind her eyes, and she pulled her hand back like I'd burned her. The shift in Simone was immediate and complete. Saturday morning, I woke up to find her going through my phone, sitting on the edge of my air mattress with my cell in her hands, scrolling through messages, call logs, everything. I asked what she was doing, and she said she was looking for proof, for evidence of whoever I was leaving her for, because there had to be someone, had to be a reason I was being so cold. I took the phone back, told her there was no one, that she'd given me plenty of reason all by herself. She didn't believe me, started accusing me of lying, of cheating, of planning this with some other woman. I left the apartment, went to the gym, lifted weights until my arms shook and my head cleared. When I came back 2 hours later, she'd gone through my things, my drawers, my work bag, my laptop. Everything was scattered across the second bedroom, clothes on the floor, papers everywhere, like a storm had torn through looking for something specific. She was sitting in the middle of it, my old journal from college open in her lap, reading entries from years ago before we'd even met. I asked what she thought she'd find, and she said she was trying to understand me, trying to figure out when I'd become this person, this stranger who could just walk away. The next few days were a cycle of obsession and desperation. She'd call me at work, sometimes 10 times in an hour, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and ended angry. She'd text paragraphs, novels, essays about our relationship, about her feelings, about how I was making a mistake. She'd show up places she knew I'd be, the grocery store, the gas station near my job site, the coffee shop where I'd study after class. Each time I'd see her, she'd have a different approach, different energy, sometimes crying, sometimes calm, sometimes furious, like she was trying every possible strategy to find the one that would crack me. Wednesday night, she was waiting in my truck when I left class. I don't know how she got in, if I'd left it unlocked or if she'd used the spare key I didn't know she had, but she was in the passenger seat, makeup perfect, dressed nice, smiling like this was normal. She said we needed to talk, really talk, without distractions or interruptions. I told her to get out, that this was breaking and entering, that she was scaring me. She laughed, said I was being dramatic, that she just wanted her husband back, that I owed her a real conversation. I called her sister, put her on speaker, and told her to come get Simone. She arrived 20 minutes later, apologizing, saying she didn't know her sister was like this, that she'd talk to her, get her help, but it didn't stop. If anything, it escalated. She started posting about us on social media. Long, rambling posts about love and forgiveness and fighting for your marriage, tagging me in all of them, making our private dissolution public. Friends started reaching out, people I hadn't talked to in years, asking if I was okay, if Simone was okay, offering advice nobody asked for. I deleted my accounts, all of them, just wiped my digital presence clean because I couldn't deal with the performance, with her rewriting our story for an audience. Thursday, she showed up at my mother's house. I don't know how she knew I'd be there, if she'd been following me or tracking my phone somehow, but I pulled up for dinner and she was on the porch, talking to my mom, crying, explaining that I was leaving her, that she didn't understand why, that she needed help convincing me to stay. My mother, bless her, was kind but firm, told Simone that this was between me and her, that she couldn't get involved, that sometimes relationships ended and you had to accept it. Simone left, but not before making a scene, yelling that my family never liked her, that they'd poisoned me against her, that this was all their fault. I moved out Sunday like I'd planned. Rented a U-Haul, packed my things while Simone sat on the couch watching, not helping, not talking, just staring. She didn't cry this time, didn't beg, just watched me dismantle our life box by box, room by room. When I loaded the last bag, she stood up, walked over, and told me I was going to regret this, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that she'd never forgive me for giving up on us. I told her that was fine, that forgiveness from her wasn't something I needed anymore. The studio apartment was small but clean, just enough space for a bed, a desk, a kitchen table. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, making it mine, making it feel like a beginning instead of an ending. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No Simone in the next room crying, no tension in the air, no waiting for the next confrontation. Just silence, just peace, just the sound of the city outside my window and the knowledge that I'd done the hard thing, the right thing, the thing that would let me build something new. The court date was 4 weeks away. Patricia called Tuesday to confirm I'd be there, asked if Simone had responded to the petition, if there were any complications. I told her about the stalking, the phone calls, the social media posts, and she said to document everything, keep records, save messages, because if Simone contested the divorce, evidence of her behavior might be useful. I started a folder on my laptop, screenshots and voicemails and timestamps, building a case I hoped I'd never need. It felt clinical, cold, but necessary, because I was learning that the woman I'd married and the woman she'd become weren't the same person. Work became my refuge. I picked up extra shifts, stayed late, volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted. My foreman noticed, commented that I was working like a man trying to forget something, and I didn't correct him because he wasn't wrong. The physical labor helped, the exhaustion helped, coming home too tired to think helped. I'd shower, eat something quick, study for an hour, and fall asleep before my mind could wander to Simone, to what she was doing, to whether she'd accepted that we were done. She hadn't. Thursday afternoon, she showed up at my new apartment. I don't know how she found the address, if she'd followed me or checked my mail or called the leasing office pretending to be family, but she was there, knocking, calling my name through the door. I didn't answer, didn't move, just sat on my bed listening to her beg, listening to her promise, listening to her threaten. She said she'd wait all night if she had to, that she wasn't leaving until I talked to her, that I couldn't ignore her forever. I called the non-emergency police line, explained that my estranged wife was harassing me, that I'd asked her to leave and she'd refused. The officer who showed up was professional, sympathetic even. He talked to Simone in the hallway, explained that she needed to leave, that I had a right to peace in my own home. She argued, said we were still married, that she had a right to see her husband, that this was all a misunderstanding. He repeated that she needed to leave, more firmly this time, and eventually she did, but not before shouting through my door that this wasn't over, that I couldn't hide from her, that she'd find a way to make me listen. I started varying my routine after that, taking different routes to work, shopping at different stores, never being in the same place at the same time twice. It felt paranoid, excessive, but Simone had proved she was willing to cross boundaries I hadn't known existed. Friday, she called my job site, asked for me, told the secretary it was an emergency. My foreman pulled me aside, said my wife was on the line, that she sounded upset. I told him not to transfer calls from her anymore, that there was no emergency, that this was part of why we were divorcing. The weekend was quiet, suspiciously so, and I didn't trust it. I stayed in my apartment, caught up on schoolwork, watched movies, tried to enjoy the peace without waiting for it to shatter. Sunday evening, my mother called, asked if I'd talked to Simone recently, if I knew she'd been calling her sisters, my aunts, anyone connected to me, trying to get them to intervene. I told her I didn't know, told her I was sorry she was getting dragged into this, told her to block Simone's number if she needed to. My mother said she wouldn't do that Simone was clearly hurting, but that she'd made her position clear, that this was between me and my wife. Monday morning, I found a letter slid under my door. No envelope, just folded paper, and I knew before I opened it that it was from Simone. The handwriting was hers, careful and neat, the kind of penmanship she used when she wanted something to look important. She'd written 10 pages, front and back, a manifesto about our relationship, about her mistakes, about how she was getting help, seeing a therapist, working on herself. She promised she'd changed, that the hall pass was the stupidest thing she'd ever asked for, that she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I'd just give her one more chance. I read it once, felt nothing, and threw it away. The words were pretty, probably sincere on some level, but they didn't matter because change took time, took proof, took consistency, and we didn't have time. The divorce was in 3 weeks, the papers were filed, and I'd already started building a life that didn't include her. I couldn't go backwards, couldn't unknow what I knew, couldn't unfeel the humiliation of that restaurant, that smile, that casual confidence when she'd asked permission to betray me. Some things, once broken, stayed broken, no matter how carefully you tried to piece them back together. The following week, Simone changed tactics again. The crying stopped, the begging stopped, and something harder took its place. She hired a lawyer, some downtown firm with a reputation for aggressive divorce litigation, and suddenly my phone was ringing with calls from her attorney, emails with subject lines like reconsideration of petition and settlement discussion required. Patricia fielded most of it, told me not to engage directly, that this was just posturing, an attempt to drag things out, to make the divorce expensive and complicated enough that I'd give up and come back. Her lawyer claimed I'd abandoned the marriage, that I'd left Simone without support, that I owed her compensation for emotional distress. Patricia laughed when she read me that part, said it was nonsense, that Simone made more money than me, that abandonment required more than just moving out after filing for divorce. But it added stress, added time, added another layer of ugliness to something that was already difficult. We had a phone conference with both lawyers present, and I had to listen to Simone's attorney paint me as cruel and vindictive, as someone who'd thrown away a good woman over nothing, who'd refused counseling or mediation or any attempt at reconciliation. Patricia shut it down efficiently, mentioned the dating apps, the messages, the hall pass request, and Simone's lawyer went quiet. There was whispering on their end, muffled conversation, and when he came back on the line, his tone had changed, less aggressive, more conciliatory. He suggested we move forward with the divorce as filed. No contest, simple dissolution. Everyone walks away clean. Patricia agreed, told me later that he'd probably just learned the full story from Simone, probably realized they didn't have a case, probably wanted to close the file and move on to clients with actual grievances. But Simone wasn't done. If she couldn't win in court, she'd win in the court of public opinion, or at least that seemed to be her strategy. She started a blog, one of those anonymous confession sites, and wrote detailed posts about her marriage, her mistakes, her husband who'd left her. She never used my name, but the details were specific enough that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. Friends started sending me links, asking if I'd seen it, asking if I was okay, and I'd have to explain again that we were divorcing, that it was complicated, that I'd appreciate privacy. The blog posts got darker. She wrote about depression, about not wanting to get out of bed, about feeling like her life was over. She wrote about driving past my apartment at night, about seeing my light on and wanting to knock but being too afraid. She wrote about our song, our first date, the way I used to make her coffee in the morning, and it was all true but also manipulative, designed to make me look like the villain, like I'd discarded someone who loved me over a single mistake. The comments section filled up with strangers telling her to stay strong, to know her worth, to find someone who appreciated her. I stopped reading after the fourth post. It was self-torture, watching her rewrite our history, watching her turn herself into a victim and me into a monster. Patricia said to let it go, that the blog didn't matter legally, that angry exes did this all the time, that eventually she'd run out of things to say and move on. But it bothered me, the injustice of it, the way she could broadcast her version of events and I had no recourse, no way to defend myself without looking petty or cruel. Thursday night, she was parked outside my apartment again. I saw her car when I got home from class, saw her sitting in the driver's seat, phone in her hand, probably writing another blog post about the man who broke her heart. I didn't confront her, didn't acknowledge her, just parked and went inside, closed my blinds and tried to pretend she wasn't there. An hour later, she knocked, soft at first, then harder, then pounding, shouting my name, demanding I talk to her. I called the police again, same as before, and they came and moved her along, and the officer told me I should consider a restraining order, that this was escalating, that he'd seen situations like this turn dangerous. I thought about it, spent the whole night weighing options, pros and cons, wondering if a restraining order would protect me or provoke her, if it would give me peace or escalate things further. By morning, I decided to wait until after the court date to see if the finalized divorce would bring closure, would help her accept that we were done and let her move on. It was 2 weeks away, 14 days, and I told myself I could handle 14 more days of her showing up, her calling, her trying to insert herself into a life I was actively building without her. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at 9. I took the day off work, put on the only suit I owned, and met Patricia in the courthouse lobby 30 minutes early. She briefed me on what to expect, told me it would be quick since Simone had agreed not to contest, told me to answer the judge's questions honestly and simply, told me not to engage if Simone tried to talk to me. We sat on a bench outside the courtroom, and I watched other couples come and go. Some crying, some angry, some just tired, all of them ending something they'd once believed would last forever. Simone arrived at 8:55 with her lawyer, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, enough that her suit hung loose and her face looked drawn, older somehow. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable, kept glancing at her like he was worried she might break down, might cause a scene. She saw me across the hall and started walking over, but her lawyer caught her arm, whispered something, guided her to a bench on the opposite side. She stared at me the whole time, eyes red, jaw tight, and I looked away because I couldn't give her what she wanted, couldn't give her ammunition, couldn't let her see that some part of me still hurt for her. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. The judge was efficient, professional, asked us both if we understood what we were doing, if we'd attempted reconciliation, if we agreed to the terms. I said yes to everything, voice steady, and Simone hesitated on the reconciliation question, started to say something, but her lawyer touched her arm and she just nodded. The judge signed the decree, declared our marriage dissolved, told us we'd receive copies in the mail, and that was it. 4 years together, 18 months married, ended with a signature and a gavel, and 20 minutes in a fluorescent-lit courtroom that smelled like floor polish and desperation. I left through the side exit, trying to avoid Simone, but she caught up with me in the parking garage. She was running, heels clicking on concrete, calling my name, and when I turned around she was crying, makeup streaming, hands shaking. She said she couldn't believe I'd actually done it, that some part of her thought I'd changed my mind at the last second, that we'd walk into that courtroom and I'd tell the judge we'd worked things out. She said she still loved me, that she'd always loved me, that she was sorry, so sorry for everything, for the hall pass, for the apps, for not appreciating what we had. I told her I accepted her apology, that I forgave her, but that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, didn't mean we could go back. She asked what she was supposed to do now, how she was supposed to move on, and I told her the truth, that I didn't know, that she'd have to figure that out the same way I was figuring out my next steps. She grabbed my arm, held tight, said she wouldn't let me go, that we were meant to be together, that this divorce was just a piece of paper, that we could get remarried, start over, do it right this time. I pulled away gently, told her goodbye and walked to my truck while she stood there crying, and I didn't look back. The relief hit me on the drive home, sudden and overwhelming, like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale. I was free, legally and completely, no longer tied to someone who'd demonstrated I wasn't enough, who'd needed permission to explore other options. The divorce was final. The door was closed, and I could move forward without wondering when she'd ask for another hall pass, another chance to hurt me, another opportunity to prove that love, for her, was conditional. I celebrated quietly that night, bought myself a good steak, opened a beer, sat on my small balcony and watched the sunset. I thought about calling someone, sharing the news, but decided against it because this moment was mine. This victory was personal, and I didn't need validation or congratulations. I'd survived betrayal, survived her stalking, survived the dissolution of something I'd thought would last forever, and I'd done it with dignity, with restraint, with the kind of silent strength my father had always preached about. Wednesday morning, I woke up to 73 missed calls and 48 text messages, all from Simone. The messages started apologetic, begging me to reconsider, promising she'd changed, and devolved into anger, accusations, threats. The final message, sent at 4 a.m, said she'd show me what it felt like to lose everything, that I'd regret walking away from her, that she'd make sure I never forgot what I'd thrown away. I screenshot everything and sent it to Patricia, asked what my options were if this constituted harassment. Patricia filed for a restraining order Thursday morning. She said the volume of calls and the threatening messages were enough, that the judge would likely grant a temporary order pending a hearing, that I needed to take this seriously because obsession like Simone's rarely de-escalated on its own. The temporary order was approved by Friday afternoon, and a deputy served Simone at her apartment that evening. She called me immediately after, screaming, asking how I could do this to her, how I could treat her like a criminal when all she wanted was to talk, to fix things, to save what we'd had. I didn't answer, didn't engage, just let the call go to voicemail and added it to the folder of evidence I was building. Patricia said the hearing for the permanent order was set for 2 weeks out, that I should expect Simone to show up, to testify, to try to convince the judge she wasn't a threat. She said I needed to be prepared to tell my story, to explain the stalking, the harassment, the way Simone had inserted herself into every aspect of my life even after the divorce was final. I practiced my testimony, wrote out timelines, organized screenshots, turned my pain into evidence that a court could understand. The weekend was the first peaceful one I'd had in months. No calls, no texts, no car parked outside my apartment at midnight. The restraining order required Simone to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, my workplace, and to have no contact whatsoever. I slept without waking up, worked without looking over my shoulder, studied without my phone buzzing every 5 minutes. It felt like I'd been living in a war zone, and someone had finally called a ceasefire, and I didn't realize how exhausted I was until the fighting stopped. Monday, I met a woman at the coffee shop where I studied. Her name was Kennedy. She worked as a nurse at the hospital downtown, and she'd asked to share my table because the place was crowded and I was the only person sitting alone. We talked between chapters, casual conversation about school, work, the city, and when I packed up to leave, she asked if I came here often, if maybe I'd want to grab dinner sometime. I hesitated, told her I'd just gotten divorced, that I wasn't sure I was ready for anything serious. She smiled, said dinner was just dinner, that we could keep it simple, no pressure. I said yes, and we exchanged numbers, and I left feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. Kennedy was easy to talk to, funny, intelligent, the kind of woman who seemed comfortable in her own skin, who didn't need validation or permission or constant reassurance. We texted throughout the week. Nothing heavy, just checking in, sharing small moments, building something that felt natural and unhurried. Our dinner was that Friday, a small Italian place near her apartment, and we talked for 3 hours, about everything and nothing, and I didn't think about Simone once. Kennedy asked about my marriage on our second date, careful, gentle, making it clear I didn't have to answer if I wasn't ready. I told her the short version, the hall pass, the divorce, the stalking, and she listened without judgment, without offering unsolicited advice or trying to fix me. She said she'd been through a difficult breakup herself a few years back, that she understood how betrayal could change you, make you cautious, make you question your own judgment. We bonded over that shared understanding, that knowledge that some relationships left scars that took time to heal. By our fourth date, I realized I was falling for her, and it terrified me because it felt too soon, too fast, like I hadn't given myself enough time to process the end of my marriage. But Kennedy was patient, let me set the pace, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. We kept it simple for the first 2 months, dinners and movies and long walks through the park, getting to know each other without the pressure of defining what we were or where this was going. It was healing, this slow build, this relationship without urgency or ultimatums. The restraining order hearing happened on a Wednesday. I sat in the same courthouse where my divorce had been finalized, this time with Patricia again, for a different purpose. Simone was there with a new attorney, and she looked worse than she had at the divorce hearing, thinner, more frantic, like she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer argued that the restraining order was unnecessary, that Simone had stopped contacting me, that she was getting help, that she deserved a chance to move on without a legal record following her. Patricia presented our evidence, the screenshots, the voicemails, the police reports, and the judge listened carefully before ruling in my favor, making the order permanent for 3 years. Simone lost it in the courtroom. The judge's ruling hadn't even fully registered before she was on her feet, shouting, telling the court that I was lying, that I'd manipulated everyone, that she was the victim here. The bailiff moved toward her, and her lawyer tried to calm her down, but she was beyond reason, beyond control. She pointed at me across the room, called me names I won't repeat, said I'd destroyed her life, that I'd pay for what I'd done. The judge warned her once, then twice, and when she didn't stop, held her in contempt, ordered her removed from the courtroom. 2 bailiffs escorted her out, and I could hear her screaming my name down the hallway, her voice echoing off marble walls, getting quieter as they took her further away. The judge apologized, said this kind of outburst was rare but not unheard of in domestic cases, asked if I felt safe, if I needed additional protection. I said I'd be fine, that the permanent order should be enough, but inside I was shaken, disturbed by how completely Simone had unraveled, how the woman I'd married had become someone I didn't recognize. Patricia walked me to my truck, told me to be vigilant, to call the police immediately if Simone violated the order, to not underestimate what someone in her state of mind might do. I promised I would, drove home carefully, checking my rearview mirror more than necessary, half expecting to see her car following me. But there was nothing, just normal traffic, normal people going about their normal days, and I started to believe that maybe this was over, that the restraining order had finally drawn a line Simone wouldn't cross. I was wrong. That Saturday, Kennedy and I went to dinner at a seafood restaurant near the waterfront. We'd been dating 3 months by then, and things were good, easy, the kind of relationship that felt like it might actually last. We were laughing about something, I don't even remember what, when I saw Simone standing by the host station, staring directly at our table. My stomach dropped, and Kennedy noticed immediately, asked what was wrong. I told her my ex-wife was here, that she wasn't supposed to be within 500 feet of me, that this was a violation of the restraining order. Kennedy stayed calm, asked if I wanted to leave, if I wanted to call the police. Before I could answer, Simone was walking toward us, moving fast, and the host was trying to stop her, but she pushed past. She reached our table and just stood there, staring at Kennedy, then at me, then back at Kennedy. She asked if this was why I'd left her, if I'd been seeing Kennedy all along, if our whole marriage had been a lie while I waited for someone better to come along. Kennedy stood up, stepped between us, told Simone she needed to leave, that she was violating a court order. Simone laughed, said Kennedy didn't know me, didn't know what I was capable of, that I'd used her and thrown her away and would do the same to anyone else stupid enough to love me. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, told the operator where we were, that my ex-wife was violating a restraining order, that we needed police assistance. Simone heard me talking, and something changed in her eyes, something dark and desperate. She grabbed my water glass and threw it, not at me but at Kennedy, soaking her dress, and then she was screaming again, calling us both names, making a scene that had the entire restaurant staring. The manager came over with 2 servers, forming a human barrier between Simone and our table, telling her she needed to leave immediately or they'd have her arrested for trespassing in addition to whatever else she'd done. She backed away slowly, still shouting, still crying, and by the time the police arrived 5 minutes later, she was gone. The officers took our statements, took descriptions of Simone and her car, said they'd issue a warrant for her arrest for violating the restraining order. They asked if we wanted to press additional charges for assault, since she'd thrown the glass at Kennedy, but Kennedy said no, said she just wanted to go home. We left the restaurant and I drove Kennedy back to her place, apologizing the whole way, telling her I was sorry she'd been pulled into this, that Simone wasn't supposed to be able to find me, that I didn't know how she'd known where we'd be. Kennedy was quiet, processing, and when we got to her apartment she asked me to come inside, to sit with her, to talk about what had just happened. We sat on her couch and I told her everything, the whole story, every detail I'd held back before, every moment of Simone's escalation, every fear I had that this would never really be over. Kennedy didn't run. I half expected her to tell me it was too much, that she didn't sign up for this kind of drama, that dating me wasn't worth the risk of having a deranged ex-wife show up at restaurants and throw things. But she didn't. She listened to everything, asked questions, held my hand, and told me that Simone's behavior wasn't my fault, that I'd done everything right, that we'd get through this together. That word, together, meant more than she could know, meant I wasn't alone in this anymore, that I had someone on my side who saw me clearly and chose to stay anyway. The police arrested Simone Monday morning at her apartment. They called to let me know, said she'd be arraigned on charges of violating the restraining order, that the judge would likely set bail, that I should expect her to be released within 24 to 48 hours. Patricia filed an emergency motion to extend the restraining order to include Kennedy, to cover both of us, and the judge approved it the same day. Kennedy took it in stride, said she'd dealt with difficult patients in the emergency room, that she wasn't afraid of Simone, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she checked her locks twice before bed. Simone made bail Tuesday afternoon. Her mother posted it, probably mortgaged something or borrowed money, probably believed her daughter's version of events, the one where I was the villain and Simone was just a woman fighting for her marriage. She was released with conditions, electronic monitoring, and strict orders to stay away from me and Kennedy, to not contact us in any way, to attend mandated counseling sessions. Patricia said violations would mean immediate jail time, that Simone was on her last chance, that one more mistake would put her away for months, maybe longer. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Kennedy and I went about our lives, cautious but not paralyzed, checking over our shoulders but not letting fear control us. We had dinner at her place, watched movies at mine, kept things low-key and private, avoiding anywhere Simone might find us. The graduation ceremony happened during that stretch. I walked across the stage and accepted my degree with Kennedy cheering from the audience, and for a few hours I forgot about Simone entirely, focusing on the achievement and the future I was building. Kennedy and I talked about that future often. 6 months in, we both knew this was serious, that what we had was rare and worth protecting. She asked me to meet her parents, and I said yes, and we drove upstate one weekend to their farmhouse, and they welcomed me like family, asked about my work, my plans, my intentions with their daughter. I was honest, told them I'd been married before, that it had ended badly, that I was taking this relationship seriously, that I had no interest in rushing or repeating past mistakes. Her father shook my hand, said he respected that, said Kennedy seemed happier than she'd been in years. We got engaged on New Year's Eve, simple and private, just the two of us on her balcony watching fireworks over the city. I'd bought the ring 3 weeks earlier, saved for it the same way I'd saved for those earrings I never gave to Simone, but this time felt different, felt right. Kennedy cried when I asked, said yes before I'd even finished the question, and we stood there holding each other while the sky exploded in color and sound. We decided on a small wedding, immediate family only, something intimate and meaningful, nothing like the big production Simone had wanted, had planned down to the last detail. The wedding was set for March, 3 months away, and we started planning immediately, picking a venue, sending invitations, making it real. I should have known the peace wouldn't last, should have expected Simone to find out somehow, but I was so caught up in building something good that I forgot how determined she was to destroy anything that didn't include her. She found out about the engagement through social media, through a friend of a friend who'd seen Kennedy's ring and posted congratulations, and that's when everything fell apart again. Valentine's Day. Kennedy came home from her shift at the hospital to find her car vandalized. Someone had keyed deep scratches into every panel, had slashed all 4 tires, had written words across the windshield in spray paint that I won't repeat, but that made it clear who was responsible. Kennedy called me shaking, and I drove over immediately, called the police while I was still en route. They came, took a report, took photos, and said the electronic monitoring showed Simone had been at home all evening, that she couldn't have done this herself. But Simone had help. The police investigation revealed she'd been communicating with her cousin, a guy named Derek who had a record, mostly petty stuff, vandalism and drug possession. They'd been planning this for weeks, using Derek as the hands while Simone stayed home, technically complying with her monitoring requirements while orchestrating everything from her apartment. The police arrested Derek that same night, found evidence on his phone, messages from Simone with instructions, photos of Kennedy's car, promises of payment once the job was done. Derek turned on Simone immediately, gave the police everything in exchange for a reduced charge, and by Thursday morning they had enough to arrest her for conspiracy, for solicitation of property damage, for violating the restraining order by proxy. This time there was no bail, no mother with money to spare. The judge called her a danger to the community, cited her history, her escalating behavior, her complete disregard for court orders. He remanded her to custody pending trial, and Patricia said she was looking at serious time, that between the restraining order violations and the vandalism conspiracy, Simone could be sentenced to 2 years, maybe more. I felt relief first, then something like sadness, because this was how it ended, not with Simone moving on and finding peace, but with her in jail, her life derailed by an obsession she couldn't control. Kennedy was more pragmatic, said Simone had made her choices, that consequences were necessary, that maybe time behind bars would force her to get the help she clearly needed. We filed a civil suit for the damages to Kennedy's car, and Simone's lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but Patricia said to push forward, to make it clear that actions had costs, that Simone couldn't terrorize people without financial ruin following criminal consequences. The trial was quick. Simone's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, claimed she was suffering from a mental health crisis, that her actions weren't fully under her control. The prosecutor countered with evidence of premeditation, planning, calculation, showed that Simone knew exactly what she was doing, knew it was illegal, did it anyway. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 months, with credit for time served, mandatory counseling, and 5 years probation after release. I attended the sentencing with Kennedy, sat in the gallery while Simone stood before the judge looking small and broken. She didn't look at me, didn't make a scene this time, just accepted her sentence with tears streaming down her face. Her mother was there, crying too, and I felt something for her, for the pain of watching your child self-destruct, for loving someone who kept making choices that hurt everyone around them. When it was over, when the bailiffs led Simone away, I stood up, took Kennedy's hand, and walked out of that courtroom for the last time. We got married in March as planned. A small ceremony in a garden, 20 people total, everyone who mattered most. My mother walked me down the aisle. Kennedy's father officiated, and we said vows we'd written ourselves, promises about honesty and patience and building something that would last. There was no drama, no last-minute interruptions, no Simone crashing through the doors demanding to be heard, just 2 people committing to each other, surrounded by love and support and the kind of peace I'd forgotten was possible. Our honeymoon was a week in the mountains, a cabin with no cell service, just us and the trees and the sound of the river outside our window. We hiked during the day, cooked together at night, talked about our future, about the family we might build, the life we'd create together. Kennedy asked me once if I thought about Simone, if I felt guilty about how things had ended, and I told her the truth, that I did think about her sometimes, hoped she'd get help, hoped she'd find peace, but that I didn't feel guilty because I'd done everything right, had given her every chance to let go, had only protected myself when she refused. We came back from the honeymoon to our new apartment, bigger than my studio, smaller than the place Simone and I had shared, but perfect for us, for where we were, for what we were building. I'd been promoted at work, was managing small projects now, using my degree, making decent money. Kennedy had taken a position in pediatrics, said she loved working with kids, that it felt meaningful in ways emergency medicine hadn't. We were building something real, something solid, something that felt like it would last because we'd both learned what happened when you took love for granted. Simone was released after serving 14 months, got out early for good behavior and program completion. Patricia called to let me know, said the probation terms were strict, that Simone wasn't allowed within 1,000 feet of us, that she'd be wearing a monitor for the duration of her probation. I thanked her, hung up, and told Kennedy that same evening. She asked if I was worried, and I said no, honestly, because too much had changed, too much time had passed. Simone had lost her power over me, lost the ability to disrupt the life I'd built with someone who knew how to love without conditions. But Simone hadn't learned. 3 weeks after her release, Kennedy and I were grocery shopping when I felt it, the familiar sensation of being watched. I turned, and there she was, at the end of the aisle, staring. She looked different, harder, thinner, her hair cut short, her eyes hollow. She didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there watching us select vegetables like we were performing in a show designed specifically to hurt her. I pulled out my phone, took a photo, called the police right there in the produce section while Kennedy guided me toward the front of the store. The police picked her up in the parking lot. Her probation officer was called, and within 48 hours she was back in court, this time for violating probation. The judge was not sympathetic, said she'd been given multiple chances, multiple warnings that the justice system had bent over backwards to help her and she'd thrown it all away. He revoked her probation and reinstated the remainder of her original sentence, another 4 months, and added 6 additional months for the violation. Simone cried, begged, promised she'd stay away, but the judge was unmoved. He said she needed more help than the court could provide, that she'd be evaluated for long-term mental health treatment, that this pattern had to stop. She served those 10 months and was released again, this time to a halfway house with stricter supervision, mandatory therapy, and a prohibition on social media or internet access that might help her locate me. Patricia said these conditions were unusual but warranted, that the judge had seen enough to know Simone posed a real risk, that she needed serious intervention. I didn't follow her progress, didn't ask for updates, just lived my life with Kennedy, trusted that the system would do what it was designed to do. Kennedy and I had our first child that fall, a daughter we named after my grandmother, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not Simone, not the past, not anything except this tiny person who needed us completely. I'd worried I'd be a bad father, that the trauma of my marriage would leak into my parenting. But Kennedy said I was wonderful, patient, present, everything a dad should be. We were tired and happy, and so focused on our daughter that months went by without me thinking about Simone at all. The final violation came when our daughter was 6 months old. Simone had been out of the halfway house for 2 months, living with her mother, supposedly working at a retail store, supposedly attending her therapy sessions. But she'd found us somehow, had learned where we lived, and had started driving past our house at night. Our neighbor noticed, an older woman who kept strange hours, and she wrote down the license plate, called the police when she saw the same car circling the block for the 3rd time in a week. The police ran the plate, connected it to Simone, and arrested her for felony stalking, her 3rd violation of court orders meant to protect us. This time the sentence was 3 years, no early release, no probation after. The prosecutor argued she was a habitual offender, that she'd demonstrated a pattern of behavior that wouldn't change without serious intervention, that the community needed protection from her obsession. The judge agreed, added mandatory psychiatric treatment, and said she wouldn't be released until her treatment team certified she no longer posed a risk. Simone's mother stopped attending court after that, stopped defending her daughter's actions, and I heard later she'd moved out of state, trying to start over somewhere the shame of her daughter's choices wouldn't follow her. Kennedy and I moved after that final arrest, not because we were scared, but because we wanted a fresh start, a house with a yard where our daughter could play, neighbors who didn't know our history, a place that was ours from the beginning. We found a perfect 3-bedroom in a good school district, close to Kennedy's hospital, close to my office, close to the life we were building one deliberate choice at a time. We painted the nursery together, planted a garden, hosted cookouts for our families, and built something that felt permanent, solid, untouchable by the past. Our daughter took her first steps in that house, said her first word, grew into a toddler who laughed easily and loved fearlessly. Kennedy and I watched her play in the backyard one Saturday afternoon, and she turned to me and said we'd made it, that we'd survived something that could have destroyed us and had come out stronger, more certain, more grateful for what we had. I kissed her, agreed, thought about that night in the restaurant when Simone had asked for a hall pass and I'd smiled and nodded, not knowing it would lead here, to this moment, to this life that was better than anything I'd imagined when I was sitting across from my ex-wife pretending everything was fine. I heard later that Simone had been released after serving her full sentence, that she'd moved across the country, was working in a bakery somewhere in Oregon, had finally accepted that we were done, that her obsession had cost her years of her life and any chance at happiness she might have had. I didn't verify the information, didn't look her up, didn't need to know. She was a chapter in my story, an important one that taught me about boundaries and self-respect and the difference between loving someone and letting them destroy you. But she wasn't my present, and she wasn't my future. That belonged to Kennedy, to our daughter, to the family we'd continue to build, to the life I'd fought for by refusing to accept less than I deserved. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Louie's place? Leave your comment, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want another powerful story, click on the video appearing to your left.